Hello everyone. Today I'll be giving a presentation on the Roktopus language. The Roktopus language is spoken by the Roktopus, a race of lithoid, stone-based organisms that appear like an octopus. Their main diet consists of rocks. They consume other minerals to build up their skin and derive energy from. They live inside of this giant non-Euclidean ocean that's essentially infinite. The interesting thing about it is it exists between universes. It seems to have been put there on purpose. The origin of this universe is actually found within their own mythology. See, what we have been able to gather is that there was a group of philosophers in this giant desert called the Sahara in their original dimension. These philosophers dedicated themselves to a very special type of meditation that allowed them to manifest their thoughts into existence. They had a certain philosophy that we're not entirely sure of, but in a way it led to the idea of this ideal creature, which ended up being the Roktopus. We have been able to trace their origin back to a country that is prominent in the language's morphology. This country is known as France. It is well known for its language that people across the countries of its world generally recognize as gross, disgusting, and a form of torture to speak. However, it is still spoken by millions. We are still investigating it to this day. To those interested in learning more about this language, please refer to the Foundation Library under the sections Throat Torture and Cursed Speech. French seems to be a very early ancestor of the Roktopus language. It is unknown how much of an influence it had or how much separation the variety that language would become had from it. Now, onto the language's interesting sounds. As opposed to many other languages we're used to, this language, while still being a spoken language, does not use regular phonemes. Instead, it uses tonemes. Now, for those who are more familiar with linguistics among you, those more interested in linguistics among you might have heard of tonal languages before. This differs. Tonal languages are based around relative pitch. The Roktopus language is based around absolute pitch. The mouths of these interesting beings are most analogous to brass instruments of our world. They have valves inside of them that lengthen or shorten the vocal tract, thus changing the exact pitch of the air released. Each syllable is a combination of 2 to 3 notes at a different length. These are originally derived from each possible syllable combination in the original simplified phonological version of French. It is very important to note that rests are also counted, which means that absolute silence can also be phonemic. Because of this system representing each individual syllable, small differences in the original phonology could be reflected by completely different note sequences. For example, chat, or cat, as it's known in our language, is the masculine form of a cat. So, here it is D 8th note, D 16th note. But when you put it in the feminine, you get E flat 16th, B 16th, F sharp 8. Two things that are originally only distinguished by a final consonant are completely different. Now, onto the language's grammar. A large part of the grammar is not brought on by the language's tonemes, but is communicated through telepathy. In this sense, telepathy is sort of like showing a color with a specific meaning, rather than communicating any specific sound or phony. I will give examples as I go through them. First of all, the language has 15 different grammatical genders. These are all communicated through telepathy, and due to being nearly impossible to represent in writing, we have opted to use these pictures of Breaking Bad characters instead. Here are the various genders. Note that several of them include France and its former colony, Quebec. On to tension marking. This language barely conjugates verbs, except for one aspect, the habitual, which is marked by repeating the sentence once again. The only way that marking is done is through attention marking, which is all indicated by a varying telepathic idea. Here we have opted to use emojis instead. For example, the attention degree, breathe, in the air, represents something fleeting in attention or memory. It is represented by a snowman. The language also contains various other affixes. These affixes are mandatory for anything under the 7th gender, as in anything considered less than a cat that is the informal head of its own household. Affixes in this language are either infixes or circumfixes. Two-note affixes are circumfixed around the word with the first note going before and the second note going after, while affixes composed of 3 notes are infixed after the first note. When multiple are present, the order follows the list from top to bottom, as presented in this presentation. These affixes can mean a variety of things, such as tasting good, being red, being able to be put on French fries, being able to be found at the grocery store, being a place, costing more than $10, being pulpy, needing to be refrigerated, being soupy, being consumed daily, smelling good, being edible, being smaller than a bread box, all natural, being a condiment, or being a toaster. What's particularly interesting is that a majority of the things marked by these affixes are completely irrelevant or don't even exist within their original dimension, meaning that their creators must have had a very specific purpose for adding it into the language, especially considering, in majority of nouns, they are mandatory. Now, on to the sample. The sample for today is a translation of the opening to the film The Bee Movie, a movie about bees. It has been translated into the Roktopus language and recorded using some of our equipment. Please be mindful that it is not perfect and we can only somewhat cross over into the reality.